How to figure out who you actually are outside of your job. When I was working in my corporate job, I gradually started not recognizing myself. Not in a dramatic way. I wasn't having a breakdown. I just noticed the things I was working towards, the goals I was chasing, the vision of success I was building. None of it felt like mine. And when I tried to find out what my values actually were, I couldn't find them. What I didn't realize at the time was how normal it is. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, they all have their own ambitions, their own vision of what their own life looks like. And slowly, without noticing, you start adopting those instead of your own. You start optimizing your life for other people's approval. For me, it was things like, if I do this, my manager would like me. If I achieve that, my parents will be proud. And none of them were actually me. The question I keep on avoiding is a simple one. Who am I outside of my job title? I think about identity like peeling back an onion. If you've seen Shrek, there's that moment when he explains ogres are like onions. They have layers. It sounds funny, but it's genuinely a useful image. Most of us are living on one surface layer. The version of us that people have shaped for years. The real work is finding out what's underneath. And when I started doing that, about 6 years ago, one question became really important to me. Would the 16-year-old me be proud of who I have become? Because think about what happened between 16 and adulthood. Everything shifts. Friends change. You go to university, straight into work. Life starts moving fast. And somewhere in the process, people quietly give up on things they actually wanted. You get a job that's okay. You're earning money. You get comfortable. And then the years go by. And you realize you've been living in someone else's life the whole time. A book that helped me understand why this is happening is The Courage of Being Disliked. One of the central ideas is that fear and doubts we carry aren't things that we're born with. They come from our experiences, from people that are around us, from what we were told about ourselves growing up, which can also mean we can unlearn them. We're not stuck with them. That was an important realization. The things I was afraid of, investing in myself, doing something impactful, starting something if I wasn't sure I was good at, those fears come from somewhere specific. They aren't facts about who I am. Once I understood that, I could start moving towards them instead of away from them. Now here's where most people get stuck. They know something is missing. They know their job isn't the full picture. If you ask them why aren't they exploring anything else, their answer is almost always the same. I don't have time. And I understand that. When you're in a demanding job, coming home exhausted, the last thing you feel like doing is something new. But I would push back on the idea that there's no time. Because I think what really starts happening is everything outside of work becomes less of a priority. Work fills a space because it's urgent. Everything else gets pushed to some day. The shift I had to make was treating things that matter to me with the same seriousness I gave work. So how do you actually start? The first step is just to be honest about what you want to do. Not what looks impressive. Not what everyone around you is doing. What actually pulls at you. And I'd be careful here, because social media makes it harder. You see something that's cool and you think you want it. And half the time you want the version of it you saw online. Paddle is a good example. I tried it before it became popular. Now everyone's obsessed with it. There's a real difference between genuinely connecting with something, and just chasing a trend. So write it down. What do you actually want to do more of? It might be getting fitter. It might be getting more creative. It might be traveling, learning something, making something. Don't overthink it. Start with what comes up honestly. Once you know what you want to do, break it down in the smallest possible first steps. If your goal is to run a marathon, you don't start with just running a marathon. You could start with a 10-minute run. That's still closer to your goal than sitting at home doing nothing. The action matters more than the size of it. For me, it was the gym. I knew I wanted to go and none of my friends were into that. And walking in alone and not knowing what you're doing is genuinely quite daunting. When I signed up to the gym, I got an introductory personal training offer, just for a few sessions, enough to make me feel comfortable, to ask questions, to build confidence in that environment. It worked. Having someone there held me accountable, supported me, and removed any thinking from it. I wasn't deciding whenever I should go. I had a time and a plan. I just showed up. That's the model for almost everything. Figuring out who you know already does it, or find a class, a group, and an introductory lesson. Something that means you're not starting alone. Then just lock in a specific time. Morning before work, evening after, a lunch break if you're working from home. Remove the decision making so it just becomes part of the week. And it doesn't have to be a big structured goal either. If you love art, go to a gallery at the weekend. Walk around the city with your phone and just take photographs. Cook something that you never cooked before. If you want to travel but you don't have anyone to come with you, start small. A different city for a weekend. A short flight somewhere close. Plan it properly so you know what you're doing each day and it stops you feeling overwhelmed. The point is to start filling your life with things that are actually yours. Not Netflix by default after a long day. Not whatever someone else is doing. But things that genuinely connect with you. One of the most useful frameworks I found getting clear on this was the Ikigai method. It's a Japanese concept and the word roughly translates to the reason of being. You map out 4 things: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. Where those 4 overlap, that's your Ikigai, your purpose. When I worked through it, honestly, my statement came out as, I help people who are burnt out and misaligned in their work rebuild their lives around their values through community, physical products, and practical knowledge that makes intentional living real and achievable. That clarity didn't come overnight. It started with small exploration I'm describing. Trying things, paying attention to what felt right. Building a picture of myself that's actually mine, not borrowed from anyone around me. At the weekend, I watched The Secret Life of Mitty. If you haven't seen it, it's about a man that spends his whole life daydreaming about adventures he never actually goes on, living entirely in his imagination while real life passes him by. And when something shifts and he actually starts moving his life in a direction he never thought, he only ever imagined. I wouldn't want to say more than that, but it hit me. But I think a lot of people are living in that story without realizing it, imagining a different version of their life while staying still. The difference between imagining and actually living isn't talent or money. It's just taking the small action and building from there. If you feel stuck right now, here's what I would do. Write down 3 things you want to do more of that has nothing to do with work. Break each thing down into small possible first steps. Find a person, a class, a group, someone that can make the first step feel less daunting. Lock in a specific time in your week for it. Morning, evening, weekend, whatever works. And then just start. Don't wait for things to feel perfectly aligned. You're not overhauling your life. You're trying to build a little bit more around you, who you actually are. Ask yourself what that 16-year-old version of you think about how you're spending your time right now. Not to make yourself feel bad, just to reconnect with something that was already there, before everything else got in the way. I'll see you in the next one.